What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we return with Mark of Suicide Silence. It is great to be able to talk with you again. Thanks for coming back, man.
What up, dude? Yeah, the first thing when I saw you right now, I was like, you look familiar. Like I
Yeah,
know you.
I interviewed you at NAMM in 2020, like right before like
Oh
Become the
yeah,
Hunter
yeah,
came
yeah.
out.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah, I ran into you. You're like, hey, if you can do an interview right now, we like pulled off on the side. Okay, I remember now.
Yep, and I remember you were the first band I ever saw live. I have to bring that up. I interviewed Chris twice, and I have to mention that every time I interview you guys. The first band I ever saw live at my first concert. So,
That is insane. That is super fucking cool, man.
yep, I was a freshman in high school at that point. So, uh,
Yeah, dude, that was when I saw my first concert too. I went
oh,
to Ozfest 2001, saw Black Sabbath. We talked about this. I
yep,
remember.
Music as a Weapon,
Yeah.
2009.
Yep.
But but
Yeah. Sick.
it's so awesome to have you back on the show because the last time I spoke to you, Become the Hunter wasn't even out yet, but now we're getting its follow up. Remember, You Must Die. I had the privilege of hearing this album, and it is absolutely kick ass. But for people who haven't heard the full length album yet, do you feel like the first singles that we got so far, such as Capable of Violence, You Must Die, Altar of Self, and Dying Life, those are a good representation of this whole album in a way, or is that just scratching the surface of what's to come?
I think it's kind of it's scratching the surface, but it's getting a little close into there because I think there's some other elements that are in there that aren't really in those songs, but it as far as what those are, that's like old school death metal, old school deathcore, and then this kind of like black metal, kind of this Altar of Self was just I don't know where that song came from. It's a totally different song to me. I don't know. Maybe it sounds like us to other people, but it sounds like a different song. But there's a little bit more of that kind of semi melodic, eerie, minor, almost black metal kind of influence in there. I'm particular, dude. I'm stoked on this record. I feel like there's peaks and valleys of it. It goes all over the place. So if people like those songs, they're gonna love this record. There is definitely more to enjoy.
Well, definitely. I mean, when I first heard this album, I mean, it took me right back to, when I first heard The Cleansing or No Time to Bleed. No Time to Bleed was my first Suicide Silence album, and, like, it took me right back to that moment, but with the more mature mindset that I had. As opposed to, being the high school kid discovering you guys. Was there sort of like a preconceived vision? Did it almost feel like you were just kind of picking up where you left off after Become the Hunter? Or were you kind of going into this with a different mindset, like, with the new drummer on board and everything, like, let's completely reinvent Suicide Silence and almost have a new beginning?
I think that really what happened with this record is it was the first time that we actually talked before we started writing and actually were like, what do you want from this album? What do I want from this album? And kind of put some mission statements out there. And Garza was the first person to say heavy as possible. And like, if anybody knows Garza, like Garza's a man of few words, and when he picks his words, it's like he'll like repeat them and use it as this quip. And heavy as possible became the ethos of this entire record. Now, yeah, it was the name of the group chat. We at HAP, and what I think really happened is that we all wanted to make a heavy as possible record, but also what we were thinking what heavy is, we pretty much were on the same page. We all were looking at the same kind of heavy. We all wanted the same thing, which I think is why when you listen to this, it does give you that old school feeling. Because I think this is the first time in a very long time that we were all on the same page of what we really wanted. And that's why, to me, why people are like, it's like nostalgic. And when I listen to it, I'm like, this sounds kind of fresh, though. There's like stuff that we haven't done yet. So I feel like there's an energy that's being portrayed that we haven't really pushed in a long time, because it's us firing on all cylinders and in agreement with each other. No one's trying to do something different than. It's not like we were pushing for something that other people didn't want. We all knew what we wanted. So yeah, fucking heavy as possible.
Well, you mentioned that there was all like an agreement with all the guys in the band, which I think is very unique, and because there's always room for disagreement, and making a new album there's always going to be room for experimentation and whatnot. So in the past, like, is do you is it better when you and Garza and Danny and Eddie and everybody are like kind of like on the same page with the songwriting, or could your different opinions or different perspectives actually help enhance what makes Suicide Silence Suicide Silence?
I think, I mean, honestly, that's a good question, and I think it's almost something that I'm curious about as well. Like I want to, as far as our process, what we have more albums we're going to make, and I wouldn't say that maybe we were as analytical of ourselves in the past or able to analyze ourselves as much because we didn't have as large of a body of work. But now it's like we're on our seventh album. We've written all these albums together, and you can kind of look. I can look at myself and go, okay, on that record, I was trying to do this, and maybe I didn't even know it, and I wasn't able to tell everyone what I was trying to do. And so there's kind of being aware is the thing that what we're trying, I think, is good for us. What do we want, and are we aware of what we want, and can we intentionally write music with more purpose? Which I feel like, judging by the way that people are reacting to this album, if we're aware and if we're more purposeful, people tend to feel like it sounds like Suicide Silence is being Suicide Silence.
Mm.
And yeah, so it's as opposed to trying to force something that, yeah, if you're not aware of what you're actually doing, then you are kind of firing and trying to get people to do things and forcing the way you want something to be on the rest of the band. And anybody can be victim of that, not just me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everybody could become victims of their own creative madness in a way, almost like victims of their own product, as I like to say in a way. But when you look, because I mean, every Suicide Silence album holds a special place and has certain memories within our hearts, and brings us back to certain times. But do you feel like your attachment or the meaning of the album to you evolves over time as you evolve as an artist, or when you're playing songs off of The Cleansing, you feel like you are who you are from in 2007? No Time to Bleed puts you back in the 2009 mindset. The Black Crown puts you back in the 2011 mindset, etc.
That's a good question. I think that I think it's more. It does put me in the mindset, I guess, to a degree, but I think it's reaching a common ground. If you're on stage, it's reaching a common ground to the fans that those songs really resonated with at that time. So it's like, oh, we're gonna play this. Like, I know how it was the first time I heard, I don't know, well, Children of Bodom, let's say. I'm thinking of a band that I love, Children of Bodom, Hatebreeder. It's like, if I'm gonna go watch, of course, rest in peace, Alexi, but it's like seeing them live for the first time. It's like you see those songs that, like, damn, this changed me. That's where my head goes. It's like, oh, we're gonna play Disengage. Like, I know there's somebody out, there's a group of people, a lot of people right now that this song means a lot to them. So it's like, it's kind of this bridge of fan and creator happening that, does, you have to go to that place, that 2009 kind of place.
Yeah.
So in a way it does, it brings you there. But yeah, I think of it definitely as like a way to be symbiotic with the audience.
Yeah.
When that's where I go.
Yeah, see, like for me, being that No Time to Bleed was how I discovered Suicide Silence. When I go back to The Cleansing, I can't really say, oh, this brings me back to 2007. But, like, when I do listen to Hands of a Killer or The Price of Beauty or The Fallen, it puts me back in the 2009 mindset when I, like, okay, I just saw you guys for the first time. Now I got to go back and listen to what else you guys got. So I think, like, really, to quote Albert Einstein in a way, but music, I think, proves that time is sort of relative in that regard.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. I guess I didn't really think about that. There's so many little factors of when people discovered the band and how what we mean to them. So when I'm playing those old songs live, it's definitely, I'm observing the reactions and seeing, how all of this, it's such a crazy energy that happens on stage. So I'm always observing, what it is, but I try to stay grounded and present, so I'm trying not to go like trying to be me in 2007 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and I'd imagine too, with every album that you put out, it gets harder to put a set list together, right? Because I know you're going to have your die-hard fans who may want to hear the demo songs back from the Tanner Womack days or something like that, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we get it all the time. Play "Soaked in Tears." It's like, dude, I don't even know how to play that song.
Oh, maybe for memories. I mean, when you did the Black Crown anniversary tour, I mean, people were very much enjoying that time. So, or I think you also did the Cleansing anniversary tour as well. So, I think everybody's always expecting a line of deep cuts at this point.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yep. I still would love to hear Conformity live, like an acoustic version of that, because I still think that that's amazing. I mean, it was almost like you guys were Catatonia at that time. So,
Yeah, we did play that song live for a little while.
yeah, I missed it
Yeah.
sadly, but hopefully one day. But when it comes to you writing your riffs and your style for the song, do you prefer to write alone more in isolation when there's nothing between you and your instrument, or do you prefer to be like in the company of Garza when writing riffs and ideas together, where camaraderie is a great fuel for creativity, but also isolation is as well?
I think that both. I mean, some of the coolest stuff comes from the collaboration, everybody in the same room. Maybe we're beating our heads against the wall trying to figure out something to do. And then all of a sudden, someone just says, just play something heavy. And then somebody plays, the pressure of your bandmates helps you go, fuck, well, here it is. And then that works. So that is always really fun and cool. And like the energy is just amazing from that. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's also nothing better than a good day of picking up your guitar, knowing that you're going to get into a writing session and completely losing track of time. And it's like, oh my God, like 9 hours just went by and I didn't even look at the clock. And like, that's a kind of a form of catharsis. Like, what the hell, just time just left. And, uh, but it's crazy that you asked that question, because I feel like this record, more than any record, because the pandemic was between Become the Hunter and this one, there was a lot of time for all of us to create and write things by ourselves and then bring them to the band room to elaborate with each other. So this record is kind of a product of everybody at home coming up with a bunch of riffs and having a bunch of material, and then this is that record. And it made me think about, I used to approach Suicide Silence, I only wanted to write music if I was in the room with everyone. I looked at it as like, we're a live band, we feed off each other. I don't write music, I don't write Suicide Silence music by myself. I'll work on things that I'm doing, just you know getting better at guitar, learning new things, learning other people's songs, whatever, coming up with just cool stuff to play. And I would just wait until I was in the room with everyone. And it's been a while since I've done that. And that's where this is what I love about music, is you finish a record and that record inspires you to write more. And now I'm like, should the next record be like 100% the way I did it the old way? Just walk into the room and let it fly.
Yeah.
So it's cool that you asked that. Like, I've never been asked that kind of question.
Well, is every riff that we hear coming from you, or every solo, or every chord progression, is that reflective of an emotion that you were feeling at that particular time? Because, for instance, I think one of the most emotional records, really just in the realm of deathcore, is "You Can't Stop Me" for obvious reasons in a way. And when you have that MAL instrumental a track opening up, you feel the emotional energy and the path to sort of starting over again. So is everything we hear instrumentally reflective of an emotion that you were feeling at that time?
I think without a doubt, yeah. I think it's impossible for it not to be. And then I think that the filter, like the taste filter, like your own taste filter, if you're writing and you're coming up with things, you know what you are trying to get out. So your taste becomes what you are judging, what you have come up with. Is this what I'm trying to sound like? Is this really what I'm trying to get out? So sometimes it's like you're kind of filtering out the things that it's like, well, that's almost that, speaking of "You Can't Stop Me," it's almost that somber, triumphant thing that we were kind of looking for. We're looking for that. Yes, we're grieving, but we're also still strong. So there is kind of you're looking to, am I sounding the way that I want to sound? And yeah, with this one, it's just like the heaviest possible thing. We all just wanted to be visceral, pissed, angry, and really have that classic just rip your face off Suicide Silence kind of sound, you know. So uh, it really comes down to your internal filter and uh, what you want to let through, you know, in how you want to revise things, and uh, when you call it the actual feeling. When you're done, you're like, okay, that's the riff now, you know. And it's crazy. You people would laugh, I'm sure, at our process, because some of our stuff is so simple, but we will dissect a simple riff so much, just over and over and over again, trying to get it to be almost as simple as possible, so that it does have that caveman stomp, dumb, honest feel. You know, it's not and it's crazy to overthink those things, but yeah. So it's to answer your question, it is impossible, I feel like, to not put out things that are the way that you feel, because you probably aren't going to keep playing it.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like your music does indeed capture a moment. And speaking of You Can't Stop Me in a way, because next year is going to be 10 years of that album, so we already went down in that catalog. And again, I think that there is such an inspiring message behind it. I know it was born out of grief, and I can only imagine how deteriorating the songwriting process could have been. But is there a plan for a celebration for that? Because I do think that the camaraderie and the beauty that Eddie shares on stage with you guys is also something, a real force that is to be reckoned with.
At this time, there isn't anything planned for it. Um, I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility, but we aren't planning anything like that yet. There's a part of me that doesn't really want to do anniversary tours, and a part of my like kind of punk rock kind of thing. I feel like blame it on Rollins and get in the van, but I feel like Rollins said it, and it resonated with me. And we had already done the cleansing 10 year, and it's like if you get to that point where you're doing your 25th anniversary of that one record, it's like it does lose a little bit of the. It's satisfying for the fans. I can definitely see that as nostalgia, but as far as the art and creativity side of it, it isn't as enjoyable, I feel like, from my perspective, especially after doing the cleansing tour. It's kind of uh it's cool, but when you're doing it every night and you got to take it everywhere, it does get kind of um
Watered down.
watered down. Yeah, and it's more of like, I'm gonna go put on a show, as opposed to I'm gonna go like express this feeling I'm feeling, because you can never go back to being who you were at that time.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do it, to do it. I don't think anybody could really do it 100% honest, and you know, try to get them to go do As the Palaces Burn and be that band again. It's really, really hard to do that kind of thing, you know.
Definitely, definitely. It's funny. I asked Lamb of God back if they were going to do an anniversary of As the Palaces Burn, and who knows? Maybe that would be great to happen. Just but I think when you
Of
brought
course.
that out on Mayhem Fest 2014, it was definitely a, a great way to come back. So
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, no, that was a moment in time. That was special. That was a wild, wild time for all of us. And yeah, I mean, You Can't Stop Me will definitely forever be that big kind of stamp. Like, damn, you know, lost the legend, and then boom, you know, that record. I can still listen to that record and go, fuck, man, we were on something. We were we were definitely like just heated up.
yeah, definitely. And I have a few more questions for you. When it comes going back to your songwriting, the inspiration for your riffs and styles, is inspiration really something that could be necessarily sought out in a way, or do you just have to kind of let the inspiration hit you?
It's a good question. Do you know Stephen Pressfield?
I've heard the name.
The I always forget if it's The War of Art or The Art of War. It's a two book, but he wrote a book, super short. It's like 128 pages, but anybody that's creative should read it. And I think what he said in that book is 100% the truth. He said that the muse doesn't always show up at 9 a.m. when I show up to my desk to write, but sometimes he does. So I show up at the same time every day in case he shows up. And I feel like that's the same way with music. It's like you can force inspiration, but you need to be doing it in a regimented way. You need to, if you are in a writing mode, not everybody's in writing mode all the time, but if you are writing a record and you're able to get into your space and start writing at the exact same time every single day, I feel like that is a way to kind of force inspiration to happen, because you aren't giving inspiration a chance not to be there. And then I also I think it's my friend Eyal Levy who does the URM podcast and the Riff Hard podcast. He's also in the band Doth. I think it was him. He's like, I don't believe in strictly relying on inspiration. Like a real professional musician will be able to put out quality music that sounds inspired, even though they weren't actually inspired to be doing it. Like someone gets hired to do the composition to a movie or the composition to a soundtrack to a Netflix show or something. Maybe they don't even like that show, but they can still be able to give it what it needs to do because they're a working musician,
Yeah.
So that's kind of a complex, there's tons of different ways you can kind of look at that, but I always look at it as if I realize I'm most inspired and I can continue feeding my inspiration if I'm always working on something that is in some way creative, either writing lyrics, thinking about, concepts for ideas, for songs, for entire albums, for a way to cleverly use the beat to move, to make a drop harder. You could do that without a guitar in your hand. I'm always trying to do that. And I've realized that I feel more inspired if I'm always trying to think about music. It's always in my head. I don't let it go anywhere. I try to stay in writing mode all the time.
Yeah, and my tattoo artist said a quote one time saying that if she only tattooed when she was inspired, she wouldn't pay her rent. So, like, in the end, you're always thinking about music, and, it's always good to have a guitar in your hand. There's just days, I think it's like any job in a way where, like, if you work in construction, there's days where you're pedal to the metal and you're working on that, and then there's some days where you are kind of going through the motions, but in the end it is going to make an impact on your craft one way or another.
Totally. And I mean, I think that's also why, like, Serge from System of a Down said, like, he doesn't think that bands should exist for longer than, I forget how long he said. I'm sure, I don't know if you're a System of a Down fan, but he said they're the greatest, and they're so controversial too with what they say. And Serge said that, like, I don't think bands should exist for longer. I think he said longer than 5 albums or something, like, or 3 albums. When does a band make their best music past album 3? And I'm like, wow, that's like really a polarizing thing to say, but I get it. I kind of get, it's like you're either chasing something that you did in the past, or you're trying to reinvent yourself and then distancing yourself from your fans and people that like what you've done. And that's so true with metal. They want you to, you need to stay young. You need to sound like you always have. And when does a metal band make their best album their 9th album?
I mean, I could think of a couple of instances where, like, band, where, like, bands make, like, their most notable work in a way, like, or their most notable album. Like, I mean, I think AC/DC's Back in Black, I mean, that was like their 6th or 7th album or something like that. I could be wrong in fact checking on that.
And that's also one of the most anomalous albums in the history of rock and roll. New singer, they became the biggest, so it's far more, much more of an anomaly than it isn't.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I believe what Serge said, but I see why he said that.
I know you're not believing in it because you're on your 7th album now. So.
Oh yeah, and I still got ideas and I want to do more. So.
Yeah, there you go. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time and for coming back on the show, and most of all, thank you for another fantastic Suicide Silence album. Is there just anything else with Suicide Silence you'd like to promote? I will be seeing you on the Chaos and Carnage tour with Dying Fetus. What else could we be expecting from Suicide Silence, if you're allowed to say, of course?
Well, yeah, I mean, pretty much Suicide Silence, man. We write music so that we can play live, and we will be playing a bunch of shows. And I mean, really, it's like, we still kind of feel like the pandemic hasn't allowed us to go be this live band yet, and now we got a new album. So, we're going to be hitting the road, and we're going to be out and about and playing all these songs and can't wait to see everybody that we haven't seen in a long time. So thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody that has watched this, listened to this, read this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And you made the album to go into the pandemic with Become the Hunter, and now you made the album to come back full force. So either way, you're making a
Fuck
soundtrack
yeah.
for the times. But thank you so much,
Fuck
everybody.
yes.
We are here with Suicide Silence. Remember, You Must Die, coming out via Century Media Records very, very soon. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Hell yeah.
Was that all right, man?